Welcome everyone, back to Cat's Eye on the Future. This week, I decided to take a break from all those wonderful interviews and take a look at what the cards and runes have coming up for us this next month or so. This time period has been flagged by astrologers and other folks as a really interesting and complicated time period astrologically. Now, I don't do astrology, but I have noticed that the runes and the cards read particularly current events in a rather similar fashion, or at least my friends who are astrologers tell me this is the case. In the sense that instead of getting exact predictions, what we get are energies that make things more likely. So I wanted to see just what the cards and runes would have to say if I cast them for this next time period. So this is the question I asked. I asked, what are the most important energies and or events the cards and runes would like to call attention to for the next month or so? And I flagged the period from around April 14th to around May 5th, 2014. Again, when we're dealing with larger blocks of time, we've talked about in the past, the energies don't always start on one day and stop on another. To do that, you kind of need to get more specific. But this gives us like a focal point of basically the next month from when I'm reading. Okay, so the first group of cards is from the Psi card deck. And these three cards suggest that the next month or so is likely to feature some issues that revolve around both the physical and material world and the health of individuals. Also the health or basically good feelings or illnesses of economies, nations, etc. I mean, this can actually flag like real epidemics of disease, but also like when we say something is out of kilter or, you know, like the weather's got the flu, essentially, it's that kind of a thing. Now, this is because we have the body card. Remember from previous readings, those of you who follow this show, the body card is often called the creepy card by my clients because it looks so much like an old drawing from an anatomy book. It shows a human body that's partly cut away to show the muscles and some of the organs and features. The figure itself is standing, and it's also holding up its hands as if to say, "Stop, do not pass." In a personal reading, this card often signifies, again, as I said above, a health issue for the person I'm reading for, or perhaps that person's problem is in the physical and material world. In other words, they're not having a spiritual or a mental crisis. The problem is here in this place. Now, we combine this with the next card, which is the Stranger. And I'm looking and thinking that it's likely something new or unexpected that's going to show up in the world of current events that's going to happen over the next 3 to 4 weeks. It's not going to be something familiar, or at least not something or someone we're expecting to show up that's going to show up at the current events roundtable. The Stranger card almost always signifies either a new person, a new event, or even a new and strange twist to a situation or idea. This card shows a male figure standing in a doorway, half in shadow and half exposed. In a private reading, often say for a relationship, this card suggests that a new love interest will be someone currently unknown to the client. Although this card can be about a person's own unknown qualities, a new part of themselves or something that they weren't expecting, perhaps a hidden talent that they didn't realize that they had. But on a current events level, we can't totally rule that one out either, that some person, nation, or even organization may suddenly show hidden abilities or qualities that were not expected, do things that we don't anticipate, basically, or something strange. Whatever or whomever the stranger is, the Liberation card next to it suggests that there have previously been either hidden or trapped, that they have either been hidden or previously trapped, and they suddenly break out into the world to be seen. The Liberation card itself, it shows a couple escaping a prison together from a dungeon, and they're riding off into the sunset together. This strange and kind of wild energy, well, it isn't either good or bad. And as always with energies, it's going to affect a number of different situations in different ways. However, you can expect things like unusual, strange, or interesting health cures. Perhaps some scientific news may explode suddenly onto the world stage about some new discovery. But these cards can also just as easily point to a liberation or a breaking out of strange new germs or other health issues. So we have the good news of a possible experiment or possibly the not so good news of a new virus. Both types of stories would fit this energy perfectly, as would any new situation that comes up quickly in an unexpected or strange way. It's likely to affect people physically in some way too, either their actual health or perhaps again the material world of the situation in which they find that they are living in, or their material possessions, their objects, their lifestyle. Again, real world stuff. So having got those cards, more or less sort of, you have an idea of what they mean. Let's move on to the Cat's Eye Tarot cards. Since we're reading for a longer time period than usual, I've chosen to do 3 cards from each of the 2 decks, as well as 3 runes, in hopes of getting the clearest picture possible of the most likely energies. Well, the first 2 Cat's Eye cards are the 5 of Wands and the 4 of Wands. And both of these deal with personal relationships and human interaction. The 5 of Kitty Wands shows a pile of 5 or 6 kittens engaged in kitten combat. They're learning the skills they will need to hunt and actually fight as adults, especially if they're ferals. But even domestic kitties will fight and play, and sometimes it gets a little serious or heated, or perhaps they'll need to protect themselves from like a stray dog or something if they're in the yard. So while they're playing at combat and defense, their skills that they're learning are very important. This card also tells us that sometimes conflict and disagreement are necessary in order to properly grow up and resolve issues. So, in other words, you can't get an answer or you can't resolve a situation many times if it's not debated and discussed. And the important thing is to kind of keep that in its more playful aspect without it getting too serious unless it has to get serious. So this card suggests a time period that is likely to be full of some tussling about and include a good deal of upheaval. It appears to be a necessary part of growth, and this isn't a situation that we can escape or resist. It's going to happen. There's going to be conflicts. There's going to be upheaval. There's going to be discussion. And there's also a strong sense of confrontation in this card. Again, it probably is a confrontation that just has to happen in order for things to go forward. But that isn't likely to make it any easier while it's happening, any more than it's really easy for a little kitten who's pinned under like 3 siblings and can't get out during that short period of time. It's very, very frustrating and possibly even a bit painful. Now, the 4 of Wands shows 2 slightly older kittens escaping the house together and into a back alley to have an adventure and hopefully a good time. This desire for adventure and escape turns out to be rewarded, in this case with a lovely chance to chase a beautiful butterfly. They enjoy their freedom and excitement without a care in the world and are able to celebrate. This card mirrors the liberation card energy pretty perfectly, especially that sense of breakout of freedom. It's almost the same card in a lot of ways, even down to having 2 individuals, 2 kittens, or a pair of lovers. They're both out and they've escaped. Breaking free and they're moving forward. In this case, rather than they're going though towards something strange and new, the card beforehand suggests that a conflict or confrontation is likely to be encountered before they have this adventure. Now, if the world is really lucky, then the 4 in Kitty Wands hints that there may be a breakout of good feelings or perhaps an actual resolution of whatever problem the stranger is talking about. And maybe it'll happen in a strange and unexpected way. That would be a fantastic outcome. And definitely the energy is there that could possibly make that happen. However, the ultimate success or failure of this resolution, or of the adventure that comes about as a result of it, may depend on how public and private emotions surrounding this issue work themselves out. That's because the Queen of Kitty Cups is the last card of this 3-card set. She is psychic, perceptive, loving, and spiritual, but she's also emotionally very involved, and she can be overwhelmed with too many competing issues at once, and she may also sometimes fail to see important clues about the behavior of others, because she's just too distracted or emotionally invested in something to be able to see clearly or rationally. So on the one hand, she's this very loving, caring kitty, or person, or aspect, but she's all heart and not a whole lot of head and easily overwhelmed. So we take all this together, and we have a combination in these cards for conflict and confrontation with a sense of adventure and a potential for a reaction from the heart or emotions rather than the thinking mind. As this energy, again, is pretty neutral, this isn't necessarily a bad thing. But you can expect there will be somewhat of an atmosphere of conflict as well as exploration over the next few weeks. And a number of people, including people in large groups like nations or national blocs or organizations and corporations, are going to react to situations emotionally rather than logical thought. So you have individuals reacting emotionally or tending to, plus individuals in groups or blocks of people doing that. That can get a bit dicey, and we'll get back to that later. But first, we want to have the runes to tie all this together before we try to make a big pattern out of this puzzle. We have 3 runes this time. They're Awaj, which usually translates as horses or an unequal partnership. Nadij, which is need fire. That's the fire you get when you're so desperate that you drive 2 sticks together. It's the most ancient way of making fire, and it's also probably the hardest. So again, that desperation feeling. And Bricano, which is the birch tree or birth. At a quick glance, these runes fit right in with the rest of the reading. They give it a fuller picture, though, of what the energies are likely to be playing up on. Awaj suggests that whomever or whatever the stranger is, and perhaps the conflict and disagreements are, that they will involve an unequal partnership or an unbalanced grouping of people or ideas. I'm getting a feeling of one partner or position being much stronger than the other. With this rune, there's a sense of being under the yoke, like 2 horses being yoked together to pull a plow or a carriage. I can think of several world situations this could apply to, but again, I'm going to wait to go into that more when we've gone over the rest of the runes. Now, the Nazis or need fire, as I said, represents desperate need or dire situation. I have a runic card deck that has a picture that goes with this rune of sailors in their ship is sinking. They're on a little tiny lifeboat in a terrible storm, and they're like praying and invoking the gods for aid. That it's that kind of dire situation. And this lends some extra gravity or gravitas to the 5 of Wands conflict card and to that emotional responses with the Queen of Kitty Cups. Especially to something new or that new or wild situation. I mean, we've got a little more serious outlook on it here. So this combination of high emotions and desperation could be highly flammable and cause a need fire to flare up in ways that may be kind of strange. They can liberate and set free emotions best held in check. And they can also challenge people to take chances and adventures they might otherwise never dream of. Again, this can be the heroic overcoming and an absolutely best outcome you can imagine, people pulling out the best sides of themselves, or it can cause people to take risks that maybe are not such a good idea. Hopefully they'll still have that butterfly at the end there, but we won't really know for sure. They could be chasing the butterfly as well. Again, the energy itself is neutral. Some of these emotional decisions born out of this need could turn out, as I said, to be like wonderful projects, or at least playful adventurers. But again, the Now-These rune, it just kind of darkens the whole thing a little bit, in my mind. If it weren't for this rune, I would have this as a much more or less likely to be kind of desperate time period, but there is that kind of sense of desperation here. The Berkana or Birth Rune actually helps bring these two streams together, though, in their potentials, and suggests this is a time period where something totally different and new could take place in the material, physical world. The potentials there for a positive breakthroughs in science or emotional intelligence, as I mentioned, and also organization, but there is also potential there for strange conflicts and disagreements that cause an emotional or unthought out, basically, heart reaction that could be rather flammable. These two outcomes are not mutually exclusive, either because the energies this wild and powerful are there, and they're going to manifest in all sorts of levels in all sorts of ways. However, the bottom line is this is likely to be a period of transformative changes and wild energies, some of which will feel like a new adventure, and some of which will create a sense of desperate need for emotional sanity and civil discourse. In other words, you're going to feel like things are just running away, the horses are stampeding, and you want something stable under your feet. My gut is telling me the major danger of this time period is that meeting of new situations with the blind emotions, which can run smack dab into that liberation, wild Four of Wands energy, and get completely out of control. The need fire unchecked could wind this up into a forest fire, but it doesn't have to happen. That's the good news. Because the powers of the birth card also hold within them the image of the mother goddess, or a strong woman or female influence who nurtured and cares for others. This could be an actual person, or just that kind of sense of mothering and caring. Again, she goes somewhat with the Queen of Cups. Even good aspects of the Queen, she's protective, and above all, she's sane. That's the mother goddess. So we have the emotional Queen mixed with the sanity of Earth. She's elemental rather than purely emotional, like her counterpart, and her energy helps frame the reading as in the body, the physical world, with the first card. So we have the body on one side and Mother Earth as the final rune. That's good framing. We've talked about framing before. It balances very, very well for the reading.
All the music used on the show today is from musicalley.com, your source for free-to-air music for podcasts. The artists place their music up for free to air in hopes that you, the listener, will visit their site and purchase some of their outstanding musical offerings. So after the show, why not visit musicalley.com and explore their extensive playlist?
And she sings, she goes home in the evening with the dew all on her wings.
Have questions? The cards have answers. If you would like a personal reading with Melody, just go to my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. That's Melody with an I, psychicreadings.com, for information, or email me at melodyreader@gmail.com. Readings are available using Skype, phone, email, or even in person if you are lucky to live in Ireland. Why not find out what special messages the cards have just for you and book a private reading today?
And see me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland. See me from beneath the sea, the best in all of Ireland.
Now, my sense is that breaking this down, well, the stranger card suggests that something new or a new situation is likely involved in this. There are some areas of current events most likely targeted here. The situation are basically the standoff between the West and Russia over Ukraine. It's one area of conflict that is likely to either be resolved or heated up by motions during this next month. And although money and wealth are noticeably absent from this reading, it doesn't mean the world of finance isn't affected, or it just isn't as likely to play center stage as a solo topic. I think it does play into the whole Ukraine, West, Russia thing, as well as some other areas, but again, it's just not as central stage there. Now, my feeling here, too, is that there'll be a certain amount of desperation and a breakout of sorts, possibly with money and currency. But as always, with this liberation energy, things can go wildly up or wildly down, which is why I will sometimes make speculations, pun intended, on the stock market, but usually I can't really tell if they're going to be wild in one way or wild in the other. In this case, I think there is going to be some volatile activity in not just the stock markets, but financials and currency in general, because the things just don't look very calm. Again, people will act on emotions whatever happens, and so expect stories about, gambling, people taking adventures with money, things being reported in the news media to that extent. And I also think that, again, with the same thing is very likely to be reflected in Russia and the Ukraine, with both the West and Vladimir Putin and, what he represents, both of them together sort of walking to the edge and walking back and walking to the edge and walking back, that kind of kittens playing over each other. But something could happen and things get out of control. It's just hard to tell. Thankfully, the energy is also there for resolution. Let's hope that that is the ultimate outcome. We just can't tell at this point. The energy in areas not strictly economical are sort of going to affect people in all sorts of situations by pushing the envelope. There's going to be high hopes of catching butterflies here. While some of these schemes are going to work out, I feel other situations are just going to run smack into a wall of world reality. That hand on the creepy card going stop. And there's some really strange and unexpected situations or outcomes are likely to come just kind of bursting on the scene. I mean, people are going to do X expecting Y, and they're going to get A. And they're going to, what? Other than the Needfire and Berkana runes, there's not a lot of indications of earth changes, or other natural type of activities here. Although the Liberation card itself can result from the freeing of trapped energies of all sorts, including things like earthquakes, volcanoes, storms. But there isn't a lot more of that in this reading, especially in the way of weather being flagged here. Needfire tends to reflect desperate situations, such as can result from natural disasters. But if anything happens along this line, it feels more earth-related than weather-related. Given the time of year, some weather-related events are likely, but I get the feeling, I'm not seeing a huge pull in that direction. It probably means that even if they happen, there may be other things going on that tend to dominate the news. Because again, we're not reading everything that happens, but we're reading the most likely things to be flagged as being ultimately extremely important, which doesn't mean things happening to individuals will be important to them. But like I said, I really feel more that if there is any kind of major thing happening, it's going to be earth-related. And again, that liberation energy would tend to be more like something let loose, like either an earthquake or a volcano. For the most part, though, this looks like a period of serious changes, which is reflected in what I have been able to learn about the astrological aspects of this time period. In fact, as I said in the beginning, one of the major reasons I did this reading was that astrologers all seem pretty convinced this was a time of serious changes, possible issues, and transformation. And I think the cards reflect that pretty well. That my cards and runes hint that the challenges are likely to be in the real material world and involve the interactions and conflicts of human beings. Conflicts and interactions that are likely to be ruled by emotional responses rather than rational thinking. They also suggest that this time period will see something or someone new burst into reality, possibly even before or while those human conflicts are taking place, because they came first before the conflict cards. So I think that that's going to come about pretty quickly, and I can't put my finger on exactly what the stranger or this strange energy or situation exactly is. But I do think it's going to be really clear what it is when it shows up. I'll be really surprised if we come back to review this in a month or two and we don't have any idea. In which case I'll just have to declare it a miss, because I think it's going to be obvious. Some people are going to react to this whatever it is, stranger emotionally, and I think it's going to start an immediate debate about what it is, what it means, how we should react. Some people are going to see that potential for adventure in it and even beautiful things in it. other people are just going to be really conflicted and concerned about it, and it could easily be part of this whole thing that's building. And again, we get emotional rather than thoughtful responses for the most part. However, there is one or more unequal partnership or situations that are uneven that's going to cause trouble now. Perhaps even some desperation, really serious stuff during this time period. Places to watch that are probably the obvious hotspots are, again, like Russia or the Middle East, but also pay attention to any unequally balanced situation or group or block of people. Government versus the governed, corporations versus consumers, power banking cartels versus small business or individuals. Again, pretty much any situation where you have an obvious partnership, willing or unwilling, where the players can't get away from each other but are inherently very unbalanced. And I'm feeling a little bit also, I think we should watch some of the big power blocks, or like the European Union, or even, again, the United States of America, or some of the BRICS nations, any of these sorts of combinations, because there's going to be a tendency towards jockeying around and a realignment and big partners ganging up on little partners and this kind of thing. There's going to be a lot of tension going on. And this situation is likely to give birth to some new responses, some of it coming out of these rather emotional feelings of desperation and need. And some of them could really be positive, such as a realignment of things and a determination to forge some new solutions, or break out, in a new way. But unfortunately, that wildfire of emotionally charged action could bring about anything from constructive legislation to late rioting in the streets or worse, some serious violence here. So again, we want to really be watching these situations and be aware in our own lives that when we feel very powerless, to take stock and try not to react emotionally, because everything is going to be out there pushing you to react in an emotional manner, and you may very well regret it later. The door is open for both kind of outcomes. But the other thing I'm really just not seeing in this reading is cool-headed thought or common sense. There are lots of cards and runes for that. We don't see them here. So basically, I suggest you all hang on to your hats for the next 3 to 4 weeks, because they're likely to be a really rather wild ride, and sort of dizzying energies flowing outward and at you at a fast and exciting pace, and things just aren't likely to slow down. In your own life, be careful to match that sense of freedom and adventure that's going to come with this, because remember, when things are flying, it can actually feel really good. But you need to remember to have an intentional use of your powers of thought and concentration, even while everything is flying at you that way, calling you to carry it, because it wants to carry you off at a cloud of emotional highs and lows. And again, that can be really exciting and fun for a little while, but you don't want to stay there. Don't wait until physical reality, that creepy card, or desperate need, that Nowsies rune, force you to a halt and demand that you change direction. Better to kind of flow and change it with intention. Instead, enjoy the adventures that come around, but don't get carried away by the chaos of it all. This feels like a really chaotic time period, too. So you should be open to new things, because they're going to come up. But just don't get washed away in unequal and destructive partnerships either. To be clarified, this is just not a good time for romance without thought. And again, there's going to be a lot of pressure in that direction. So if you partner with somebody new, enjoy it, but please wait a few weeks before making a serious commitment if you don't already have one. If you already have one, that's fine, but this is going to be a time to think, when people are going to be thinking with their hearts and not their heads. You need both. And so anyone in a serious or long-term relationship already will want to be aware that the forces of change and new situations are likely to arise during this period. And they just need to be ready to focus on the intuitive and loving aspects of the Queen of Cups, rather than on her tendency towards emotional overload. Just, accept that things are changing, accept that your partner may have discovering some new needs or qualities or even talents, and just kind of try to go with the flow And don't challenge, because again, there's a lot of energy out there for challenge and conflict, and you just don't want to go there if you can avoid it. And you can use your head to think, when you feel yourself getting carried away, to think, I need to pull back, I need to wait, I need to think about this and decide if this is really what I mean to say or what I really want to do, instead of just reacting. Now, career-wise, this can also be a time of change and some stress or conflict, but also some good stress and conflict, because it's a time to look for new situations, that butterfly. Don't be afraid to explore off in new directions or take the first steps. Just don't get stuck out too far without some sure footing. Again, you will need to make a conscious choice to use your head this month, as everything out there is going to be whacking you with the desires of the heart, like whack, whack, whack. Desires and goals and even fantasies and things we reach for are fantastic, because we need, again, both emotion and thought to live that balanced life. But some periods of times are more naturally balanced than others, and the coming 4 weeks are about as unbalanced as I've seen for a while. Which, again, isn't necessarily a bad thing. I keep saying that. I keep returning to that phrase, but it's really the case. Because the potentials are there for lots of things. When energies are out of balance, great changes and opportunities can arise, because they're particularly when energy is exciting and raising like this. It's especially good for people who are aware of the situation and plan accordingly. The important thing during a time period like this is to keep your eyes open, be aware of the physical and spiritual worlds. In other words, if you pray or meditate or get exercise, take care of yourself, eat right, sleep, all the things we know we should do, but right now they're particularly critical because you want to be working with all your senses, not just the emotional ones. You need to be attuned to the energies that are pushing you and everyone around you. Be aware that this is happening, so you can take steps towards your own personal balance as required. We have the outside world the energies being very unbalanced, but we can as individuals choose to try to remain as balanced as we can. And when things really get wild out there, and they probably will, remind yourself that this too shall pass. The energies that tip wildly in one direction are likely is not going to balance back in the other in fairly short order. So right now, we're in what I would call a very active energy period, with things sort of directed outward and just wild ride stuff. And, well, there is no perfect balance that I know of. I mean, energy's never completely balanced. The world seems to work that they will try to rebalance. So I'm expecting that fairly soon, this very high energy period is likely to be followed by, if not a quiet period, at least a period when things become more inward seeking, more inward focused. Even if they're still kind of intense, they'll be intense in a different way. And there'll be this kind of rocking back and forth. Now, I don't necessarily think that the outward energy is necessarily going to stop on the dot in 4 weeks. We haven't looked ahead for that. Sometimes time periods can actually last several months. But usually this sort of wild ride type stuff doesn't go on for more than a few weeks, because it has to sort of, people just get exhausted. Even if the energy out there would like to continue, it kind of like blows itself out like a strong wind. And then it sort of gets calm for a while. Now, a lot of times things can be going on under the surface, but it sort of gives you a breather. So I think that we will be encountering that later. And I will be looking at that. I think I'm going to try to take another look in a few weeks, even if we continue to have lots of interviews, and I hope we will. It depends on who I can find to interview and what's going on. But I think we'll continue with interviews, and then maybe some topical shows where I talk about things like warding or energies or different topics. But again, I want to look in a few weeks back at these energies to see what's coming next, because I think it'll be very interesting to see how much of this actually works out as described, and at what point things start to tip. And if you're further interested, I try to look at more energies of each day, or basically of the week, in my blog at my website, melodipsychicreadings.com. Just go to card of the day. It's mostly, I do about 5 days a week on it, and a weekend, sort of a weekend reading. And you can get a better idea, more focused down to what a particular day is likely to be like. But I think for right now, that's about all I can add to the next 3 to 4 weeks. Nothing else I don't think is going to be boring. But that's about all for this evening, so I want everyone to take care, and I look forward to seeing you next time for Cat's Eye on the Future.
But here's a health to the company and one to my lass.
You have been listening to Cat's Eye on the Future, the show where we take a glimpse of the energies coming soon into your world and into your future. Be sure to join us again next time when we explore another chapter of Cat's Eye on the Future.
Again. But here's a health to the company and one to my lass.